let me welcome all the participants for the panel discussion on which is majorly towards marketing and consumer behavior. And oh, hi, Professor Sai. And I would like to welcome the participants and I'd like to introduce the panel members. So we have with us Mr. Pushkaraj Shinai, who is the CEO of Lakme Lever. We have Professor Rama Bijapurkar, who I don't think needs any introduction. And we also have Atishi Pradhan with us, who is a Global Planning Director of Wunderman Thompson and also a visiting faculty of IIM Ahmedabad. So what I would like to do is we'd like to continue with our tradition of IIM Ahmedabad of an unstructured discussion rather than allowing people to present and then giving a chance to somebody. We would actually start with one person, and as the discussion flows, we will allow the other panel members to chip in. And what we would try to do is we try to actually look into the major topic, the overall topic of consumer mobility in technology and consumer behavior from both the practitioners as well as the academicians' viewpoint. And I'm really very happy to tell you that we have two people within us who are actually equally good in both the sides, like Atishi and Rama. So I would like to hand over the panel first to Atishi, and she had actually shared a very nice set of bullets with me. And yesterday when we were having a discussion, she shared some very interesting anecdotes which she's going to talk about today. And then we can actually allow the panel members to chip in on and off. And maybe around 4:45, we would like to wrap up. And then I would like to give my closing comments. Thank you. Atishi, over to you.
Thank you. So just apart from that very brief introduction, I'd like to add, like I think many of us are, I'm also an alum of IIM Ahmedabad. So always nice to be back associated with the institute. So, you know, when I was the behavioral science is, of course, a sort of very hot topic, and we all like to read up about it, etc. And the more I read about it and the more I look at it, I find that actually in the area of digital marketing, e-commerce sites, mobile marketing, even if we haven't formally called it, you know, applying behavioral science, all the things that go into the design of these of the websites and of the mobile apps, as well as the marketing strategies used, actually use so much of behavioral science. And I was just saying that, for example, if you look at any e-commerce site, you know, it uses all the sort of heuristics that behavioral science talks about. It sort of creates a scarcity effect by telling you, all right, you know, for this limited time only, or so many people have already bought it, or just today, actually, I happen to be buying a air ticket and it said only 4 seats left at this price. So, you know, they create those sort of scarcity heuristics. Then they also tell you, again, all of us, when we go on to Amazon, you know, it'll say people who bought this also bought this. Yeah. So they're sort of nudging you towards through suggestive selling or whatever you want to call it, nudging you to do more. Then there is the whole the user reviews. User reviews are nothing but, in a way, giving you social proof that if they, and we all do it as consumers ourselves. So the people who've designed it are using all these principles. And then, of course, you know, because cart abandonment is such a big thing in e-commerce, therefore it talks about, you know, it tells you and eases the whole payment so that you sort of, it nudges you, and even simple things like the fact that your credit card details or your home delivery details are saved over there when you're a repeat buyer is just sort of to reduce the friction so that, you know, you go through with the purchase. So if you look at it from when you come onto the website to till you finally make the purchase, it's a series of nudges and a series of interventions, as behavior science calls them, to be applied in marketing. So behavior science is more often than not talked in terms of public policy and, you know, getting vaccination drives going and you know, social good and government interventions. But in marketing, and especially in digital and mobile, every notification that we get on an app is a nudge. So that's really was my starting point to say that actually both digital and mobile marketing is full of principles of behavior science. If anyone would like to add anything um, to that.
Yeah, so I would like to put this question to Pushkar, saying that, well, how do you see the effect of nudge on high involvement products? So what do you think technology, how to what is the role of nudge, the word Vatishi mentioned, that those nudges which we are doing online or using electronic media, how do you think it affects consumer behavior with respect to high involvement products? So whenever we talk about high-end cosmetics, where do you see the role of these types of technology-driven nudges?
So actually, I'd like to step back a bit. I think when it comes to consumer behavior, consumer consumption, both in terms of time as well as goods and services on the mobile phone, I think it's really important to understand that you need to go micro. Right, you can't generalize that in this category the consumer will behave in a certain way, right? So just take an example. You want to book a hotel, right? You want to book a hotel room. You could be actually lounging around on your sofa. There's some Netflix film, sort of playing in the background, and you are, very luxuriously sort of, skipping through all details of various properties and all that. That's a different context and a different, sort of mind space. But at the same time, you could be actually looking for a hotel. You are at the airport and you have to get there in the next 30 minutes. Something's gone wrong with your previous booking and you're looking at it, right? So I think you can't really generalize a category as high involvement, low involvement. You can't generalize a consumer. You just can't generalize. I think the real thing is we've been taught to think big. I think in this space now, it's really important to think small, execute small. And everything that you do really needs to be micro, right? And when you say micro, it is one consumer at a time, segment of one rules, right? It's one customer journey at a time. For the same consumer, there might be multiple customer journeys, and you have to be ready, and your technology and your UI and all of that has to be intuitive to be able to recognize that, predict it, reduce friction, throw in the right kind of contextual information, but really adapt to that, right? So it's one consumer customer journey, and really one micro moment, as Google calls it, that you need to design around. So I would shudder to classify anything as high, low involvement, or bucket a type of consumer. You should really at one level be absolutely clear and simple what you stand for as a brand and what is the proposition that you deliver. And then everything else should be able to, you should be able to deliver it in a flexible way to what that consumer needs at that point in time. You can't judge this consumer, or you can't judge the consumer, or you can't sort of, try to, preempt beyond the point, right? I think like marketing, especially on mobile, is becoming more like an empirical science. You have to be ready for everything. It's like one big lab. You have to keep concocting on the basis of what the consumer does at every point in time. I don't know what Prof. Rama and Prof. Atishi feel about it, but I have I think it's an extremely humbling experience. You have to sort of be micro and contextual and ready all the time.
Rama is grinning, which means she has something in her mind. Rama, you are muted.
You're mute.
I'm not grinning because I have something in my mind. I'm grinning because Pushkaraj has talked about it being humbling, and this whole space is completely humbling for me. And let me tell you what I struggle with all the time from where I sit. Firstly, I'm moving towards Vanaprastha, so I'm not a practicing anything at the moment. But every time now we sit on boards, people are coming and saying, I'm going to set up a digital business. I need money to set up a digital business. And we say, okay, tell us about your digital business. And we get to hear a lot of the micro ground level engineering little details. But at the end of the day, we're still struggling to figure out, how the hell is your business going to succeed? And we hear that we're going to do a segment of one, we're going to customize, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So I keep struggling with what is the overall design. So for example, the way I think about it is that, the broad rules are that you have an evoked set of options. When you're setting out to do something, you process the value of those options and you choose the one that gives you the best value. I think this is motherhood and apple pie. I don't know that anybody chooses something that doesn't give you the best perceived value at that point in time. I don't think anybody does anything that doesn't process value. Now, what I struggle with is nobody explains to me anything about how value processing algorithms work in the new world. So yeah, you get a nudge, yeah, you get a repeat reminder. And I think that is really the research agenda for the center and for the institute and everything else, to say, how does this value get processed? You know, what are the elements of it? So I was just reading Ram Charan's book that talks about something to do with changing sources of competitive advantage. It's his new book. And there he's really saying that competitive advantage comes from your customer experience. It comes from, it really comes from there. So clearly, he also says it comes from the ecosystem. So how do people process value in an ecosystem? So I'm sometimes told that, so I sometimes have to remind people that you've given me a long speech on onboarding, which is your understanding of how behavior actually works, but acquisition is not onboarding. Or people tell me that actually it's not about digital, it is about phygital. And I'm saying, are you going to start from the physical world and translate what you've learned into the digital world? Are you going to start from the digital world? I know that there are people born digital, but I also know I work with one company, which is a very high touch company in the sense that it is a rural lender. It has very deep tentacles into rural areas. And I think it does credit appraisal very well with the touchy-feely feel of a top-class institution, which has deep-rooted troops everywhere. Now, I keep thinking that when you move that into a high-tech organization and you say that, all right, fine, now the digital world is on us, how are you going to take that high touch and actually get a high touch and high tech company? So these are things that I grapple with on consumer behavior, which is how are you going to design this whole system and what is our understanding of processing value? And that's what I am hoping to learn. I completely agree with what everyone said. That also I know that value is being processed in an environment where we're multitasking. This is a confession that will damn me forever, but I sometimes shop during extremely boring meetings. And not just when I'm at home on Zoom, but sometimes when I'm in the room as well. And clearly at that point in time, the way I process price is very different because you're sitting down and listening to crores and crores and crores of rupees being discussed. So that's really where my struggle is. I guess what I'm trying to do is align everybody with my confusion in the hope that I will learn. And I think the algorithms in the head are very different, processing values very different. And that's what I think that's where all our confusion in the world in which I live in actually happens.
Again, a cue from that point, and since Atishi had actually given me some pointers or some anecdotes. So first of all, Rama actually mentioned that, well, these things are very well said, but very difficult to maybe understand or practice. And I will take a cue from what Pushkaraj said. I would use the word maybe nano segmentation. So Atishi, can you actually tell us where should be the starting point of nano segmentation? So even if I talk of deciding a nudge, at what part of the consumer funnel I'm starting to think of it? How do I at all know what are those nano segmentations and what are the values which are at least expected? I mean, it's very difficult to exactly quantify, but at least expected from those segments. And then how do I really design those nudges so that I get at least a behavior which is close to the desired behavior from the marketer's perspective?
I'm not sure I can answer that question, but you know, one of the things that I was speaking to a person who's a professor of behavioral science at Ashoka University. And one of the things that she said to me, I thought was very interesting, where she said that actually one of the learnings in behavioral science is that you don't do demographic and attitudinal segmentation. So if you do look at micro segments, they're more based on actual behavior. So, for example, on e-commerce, is it a first-time visitor? Is it a multiple-time visitor? What are the other categories they have bought? Have they abandoned the cart? How much searching do they do? So, what can you learn about their behavior? And if the algorithms, as Professor Rama Bijapurkar called it, on that e-commerce site, etc., are taking all those factors into account. And that's how then those algorithms build those nano segments or segments of one, etc., because they're responding to the behavior on the site or on the mobile app, rather than to, whether you're 50 plus years old with 2 kids or a younger person who's not yet married, etc., etc. They don't know your demographics. Actually, on digital, most websites and apps will not know your demographics or your attitudes unless they then, link back to some Facebook profiling, etc. And in the days of privacy building up, that's anyway less and less likely to happen. So those micro segments are built on that, and therefore even which one's going to drive more value from a very are they going to go through to the purchase and from that type of a definition, a narrow definition of value, though I know that Professor Bijapurkar means a much broader sense of it, but from that narrow sense, then how far away are you in the funnel from that? How many people are at what stages of the funnel? So it can sound very mathematical, but hopefully the algorithms do that and we don't need to worry about it. And for someone like me, where I've actually spent my career in advertising, where we tend to look more for attitudinal change, etc., I think one of the key learnings of behavioral science is that you're not actually too bothered about changing attitudes as much. So that if you can just change the behavior, that may result in the result and value capture that you want.
Okay, Pushkaraj, your views on that?
I can't really answer what the starting point is. And I would say that, I think it's a bit limited to start looking at people who are here only to shop, right? So if you look at consumers or clients or people on the digital medium, I think they have an intent, and then there is a certain context, right? And it's always sort of, at the crossroad of that intent and context that you'll see some actions, and you should sort of, find the best fit there. And broadly, I think the intent is they come there to know, right? To seek information. And again, obviously the context decides whether they want quick information, they want like one single bullet point, or they want to really get their hands dirty and know a lot more. But I think that's the first one. Second is that if they have to go someplace, right? And therefore, if you see that a lot of the XYZ near me, those searches have like multiplied in the last 2 or 3 years, right? So to know, to go, to do something, the whole how to, and the number of people who are self-taught, either through courses on MOOC or on YouTube or whatever. And it's not just like people are learning theoretical courses; they're actually learning practical stuff on these kind of interfaces, right? And then of course, last is to sort of consummate the transaction or to buy. Now, all of this, I mean, there could be more intents, but broadly there are these 4 buckets of intent, and then there is a context to it, and there may be other dimensions to this as well. And I would say, like Professor Atishi said, you will really need to create cohorts by these, these intent into context kind of combinations, and then try and plot customer journeys. And again, there is no one answer. You'll have to constantly keep reinventing this and creating, and sort of either deliver on information, deliver on go, deliver on transactions, and then cater to this consumer. So I don't think it's a process which you say that it's done. It's a never-ending process. You start with this intersection of intent and context, but I mean, it just keeps going on. And you just have to keep refining this and keep trying out new things. And, I mean, A/B testing is given. Like what we try and do at Lakme Lever is never test one thing, right? We're always trying to say, whether it's an email that we send, we'll say that let's pitch one email versus the other, one customer journey versus the other. And we're always trying. So what happens at the end of the day, there is one that wins. So we never feel like a loser. in that, right? So it's always like, it's one versus the other, and we just keep, I think the whole setup is a bit like a lab. So you constantly keep pitching one option versus the other, learn, put money on that option, then again split it into two options, right? It's just a process like that. So I really don't know what's the starting point, because there isn't really one starting point, and I don't think there is a finishing line either.
I mean, just responding to that, and when I teach mobile marketing at Ahmedabad, I always say the starting point is actually the business problem. Sometimes actually I find the students struggle to identify the business problem. But, so what's the business problem you're starting with, right? So, to your question on where in the consumer journey and where are nudges required more, I do a case study on Starbucks. And how the app is designed, and it has interventions or features, I shouldn't call it interventions. The Starbucks app, let's say, or any app, but I'm giving Starbucks as an example, has features all along. So there are features such as notifications, which are, let's say, location-based, which is a huge advantage of mobile to establish context. Because, now, hey, the marketer algorithm somewhere knows your location and stuff, and whether you're at an airport or you're actually just in New York City, getting off a subway and walking to your office. So it establishes the context, and then it can give you a notification, which is very top of funnel, right? Or it has features such as gift to friends and gift cards, etc., which are again top of funnel because they're trying to get more people to come in. Or you could say it's bottom of funnel because for you're advocating it. And then there are features which are telling you, nudging you all along the journey. Now, the question that I, pose to the class is now, do you think that if Starbucks was to launch that app in India, then they would have all these features? No, because the Indian context is very different. There are fewer stores. There's, while the app in the US is designed to make the purchase very frictionless and very fast. The whole idea of mobile ordering for the Starbucks app in New York is that you, while you're in the tube, you order. And therefore, by the time you exit the tube and you're walking to office, you pick up your coffee. Because people just want to pick it up on their way to office. Whereas in India, Starbucks is a destination. You want to go to Starbucks. You want to sit there and have your coffee. So if they do have an app here, then its role becomes very different. So what's the business problem? What's the context? Should be the starting point in then defining, let's say, even how an app is designed and what are the sort of features you would put in it. So to my mind, sorry, Pushkar, but that's the starting point from one point of view. Yeah.
Kama, your views, please. And I would like you to also address this content, because this is, I really found this very interesting. So along with that, if you can throw a little bit like that, how our context is very different from West, and how we should really look into using that context to build content.
Okay, let me try. Your questions, Shubhadeep, are quite challenging. I'm glad I don't sit in your class because CP would go for a 6. But so I want to just come back. I will come to your question as well, but I want to come back a bit on just on what I've heard. Firstly, in my mind, consumer behavior is not just about what people behave in the actual act of doing or behaving, but it's why they behave that way, and more importantly, what can we do in order to make them behave in a particular way. So it could be an intervention in your journey. It could be an intervention, as you say, in understanding the content that comes with every context. It could be any number of places where you actually intervene in the entire process. Again, I think words like journey, I know what they mean and I know they're popular, but I find that a lot of people use it. It's almost like a Havan Kund from the time you come in till the time you leave, whereas everything outside is actually influencing the way you process value. So if you say that is basically what it's like a lot of companies tell me also that we do learn, do. So can you please give us money for experimentation so that we can do, learn, do. We run a lot of battery of little experiments. My question is always, what do you learn? I mean, because if you only learn that if I flash green, the banana will be picked up. If I flash red, the banana will not. And everybody else figures this out, and somebody else is coming in and flashing purple, then what are you going to do with the green and red and the banana being picked up or not? So to that extent, I am completely obsessed with trying to understand how in this new world, people actually process value. And Atishi, when I use the word algorithm, I think it's partly the algorithm that the sites have to track what you do. But to me, more importantly, it is the processing algorithm inside the heads of every one of us. And that algorithm is shaped by the context. That algorithm is shaped by the content. I mean, I think Pushkaraj just said that if you're sitting down in one situation, if you're buying a ticket or booking a hotel room for one situation as compared to another, I think the value processing algorithm inside your head is actually different in terms of what value you attach to features, to prices, whatever, in a meta sense. So for example, if we say that learning about behavior is about understanding that people do extreme searches for this, or extreme large number of searches for this. They could be bargain hunting, or they could just be anal benefit maximizers. And if they're anal benefit maximizers, then to nudge that one person is going to have to be different from the other one, which is if I'm bargain hunting. So I think that is actually the challenge also that you often have with big data. So I think Pushkaraj brings another dimension to it, which is the low cost of experimentation. So you do learn. It basically says that, hey, even if I don't know the grand scheme, even if I haven't plumbed the depths of what the consumer is thinking, as long as I have a fairly low cost, quick way of experimenting without, while the plane is flying in full flight, if I can keep nudging the navigation one way or another and figuring out how it responds, then I'm still good enough. And I think that is indeed what a lot of companies do, what a lot of companies tell me, and that is actually the value of auto-captured big data. But the question I always ask is that through all these little experiments that you do, are there any generic lessons that you pick up? And how do you use those generic lessons? And how does the organization then become a learning organization? And as far as context and content is concerned, I think I understand what you mean. I think the way people process value, if you say that there is a computer inside everybody's head with an algorithm which reflects the way you value things. For example, I'm noticing last lockdown to this lockdown, I think the context has changed. I think people are fed up. I think there is certainly in my state of government that isn't trusted very much. And I find that people are saying, hey, I don't believe this. I don't believe these numbers. I think this is just politics, as compared to how terrified they were the previous time. So I think the context has changed completely, and repeating the same threats that were repeated last time isn't working this time. I've been out of the house today and I could have done 5 bits of shopping because all the shops are open. And I keep asking myself, what's changed? Are people less afraid of dying? Is it the effect of that Peltzman or whoever that behavioral scientist is, who an economics guy actually, who says that things like vaccine and so on and so forth actually give you a false sense of security. So I'm always struggling for the whys. I'm never satisfied with the whats. And I'm saying, yes, do learn, do is extremely good low cost experimentation. Thank God, Pushkaraj, your company will not be doing 150 product tests. You can do them now all in line. But at the end of it, there has to be some gestalt learning that you get out of it, right? On this is the way our world is working, so that we can make it work to our advantage better. So Atishi, that's really what I'm asking of you and Pushkaraj.
Who would like to take the first shot?
If you're saying that Professor Roy asks tough questions, yours are much more tough.
So maybe I'll take a stab at it.
Good.
What was that?
I've been in Professor Rama's class 20 years back, so maybe I'll take a stab at it.
Please.
First. See, I think, ma'am, I think fundamentally the consumer and what drives the consumer doesn't change, right? At the end of it, the consumer is seeking value. And therefore, I think I would say there are two broad themes. One is that the experience needs to be as real as possible, right? So in designing that experience, the closer you get to, the to reality or the consumer's comfort zone, I think the better it is, right? So this is the consumer who's like, for example, 60% of searches were using voice. In a country like India, that also sort of tides over illiteracy and, problems like that, right? So, or take our own example where education is at the heart of our business in the beauty services space. And over the last year, we have done as much digital training that we did over the previous 6 years, right? And most companies would have done that. And it's not just that we did that much training, but we were able to make it useful, impactful, and we found that the impact of that training or the expertise delivered as a result of that training wasn't very different when we were doing in-classroom training. But of course, we had to invest in the right tools and techniques and the right sort of modules and lesson plans so that we can adjust to that medium. You can't obviously do like a full day long session. You have to break it down. You need to do like periodic assessments 3 times during the session. So you have to sort of adjust to it. But I think the one trick is to actually get as real as possible to the physical experience, whether it's search, it's how you are giving information, how you're sort of interacting with consumers. So, for example, on Dermalogica, we have an app which has an AI backend, but the consumer can use a mobile phone and in 3 minutes understand the needs of the skin, and it then tosses out really what the need of your skin at that moment is, right? And it's power in the consumer's hand. You don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to do anything else and all that, and you sort of cut all the friction and tension in using that app or that device. And I think it's not only investing in a lot of technology. Like if you look at a lot of standalones, right? I'll take a completely different space like fitness, right? Over the last year, the number of standalones, and we might have heard of CultFit and some of these large companies who have poured like millions of lots of dollars into technology. But there are lots of standalone people who have actually used Instagram to just do a split screen training. And I know of one who basically does a 20-day session, which is an hour each. And this guy makes about 10 to 12 lakh rupees from 20 days, 1 hour each, right? And he has students who are across the world, at least in like 40 different cities, 6-7 different time zones. And he's just doing CrossFit training for the last so many months, right? And it's a great business model. He's delivering, his clients are happy. He's sort of, reaching out to more customers. He's segmenting using current customers to reach out to the next, sort of concentric circle of customers. So I think it's just smart usage of technology, understanding the consumer, understanding intent and context both, and then delivering to it, but keeping the experience as real as possible. Right? Because consumers are not willing to make that compromise, saying that, okay, I'm now using digital, so I don't want X, Y. It's like, we want healthy food, but we want it to taste like, butter chicken or whatever it is, right? So I think it's the real, as close as you get to real, I think is really is critical. And the second one is, I think we use the word omni in a very, very sort of loose way, and omni is largely sort of physical plus digital. But I think that's really critical. So the consumer today expects your brand to be omniscient and have the right kind of information and give it in the right kind of packets to you at the right time. It expects you to be omnipotent and actually deliver to every kind of need state. Of course, in that limited sort of, offering or proposition that you have. And then comes like, be omnipresent, and whenever I need it, the brand should be, available at an arm's length of desire. But I think both, all three, I think knowledge, the ability to craft that proposition to my need and then deliver it to me wherever I want it is critical. So I think these two sort of large themes are important, and then you need to sort of, go as micro or nano as Professor Roy put it, and deliver to that consumer. And I think just basic stuff, like I meet a lot of people who have started their marketing in the digital or performance marketing space. They start by saying, we know nothing about the consumer, we just keep testing and something works. But I just think, basic stuff on what color codes mean, right? What language means, all that, I think, is like whether it's a 30-second TV commercial or it's a, static outdoor or whatever it is that you're designing. I think the basic principles of how consumers interpret and cultural codes and all that, I think still stays, right? So I think we shouldn't be throwing out.
So Pushkaraj, perhaps the method of learning about consumers is different. you learn from much more looking at them in the real space and what they do.
That's right.
I mean, in action, so to speak, rather than
Absolutely.
offline, off action in the old days of research, which 20 or 30 years ago you would do.
Um, I'm not sure. I actually say that you're learning very different things in both, right?
Okay.
Because in the old ways of market research and qualitative research, and I mean, that is still needed. You still need to understand the attitudes and you know.
Why? If everybody's do learn, do watch what's going on, this is tech, it's auto capture. Why do we need the other world?
Yeah, so I think that's where the marketing world is now divided or perhaps coming together. But there are two things of there's the brand building and there's performance marketing, and they both need to be together. And they shouldn't be treated separately. But you know, because in the performance marketing, we get so caught up in those click-through rates, and you know, and therefore, what trigger helped me get better click-through rates, and that behavior mapping, versus what's your brand, and what's the ethos and values and emotional connect that the brand is building. And somewhere the two worlds have to meet. I mean, while I may like, going back to my Starbucks example, I may like Starbucks as a brand, but if it starts faltering and doesn't, you know, it's creating more loyalty by doing all this through the app, and you know, and it's delivering to other needs of mine of, you know, that quick cup of coffee, etc., etc. So it's understanding me and building that in. And I think, therefore, the two worlds do have to meet, but you still need that. You need to understand if you're going to do brand building, which, of course, I think all of us who do want to do in the marketing world. And in fact, I was giving another example of, and I'd mentioned that in my email, of, you know, what Hindustan Lever did when they set up a few years ago. I think now it was like 2013 or 14 when they set up Kaan Khajura Station, the mobile radio program that they set up in Bihar and in UP. At that point, actually, I was working with a mobile marketing startup. So I was involved in the pilot for it. And it was, now on the one hand, it was, you know, you could say it was classical marketing, because all we were going to put on that mobile radio were standard jingles and radio ads for, let's say, Wheel, or, you know, but way beyond that, it went into actually understanding, therefore, those media dark areas of Bihar, understanding what the mobile means in their world, what entertainment means in their world. And media dark means they're not watching television, they don't have electricity, even if they own a TV set, which most of them won't, but they won't have electricity. So therefore the TV set's just actually a box sitting there. They may not be literate, and therefore they won't be reading newspapers and things like that. And radio is not actually not as widespread, because they don't have FM in a lot of these media dark areas. That's why they're called media dark. And therefore, so when we talk about it, for example, in our boardrooms or even in our classroom, a lot of the students also say, but, imagine getting this, your phone rings and you pick it up and you're listening to some song and some ad from Wheel. I mean, how irritating is that? But in the context of the media dark regions of India and these people, it worked because they were actually getting to listen to songs. And it was an entertainment device. So that learning comes from actually just understanding culture, understanding society, understanding people. Then the behavior nudge we need is to keep on reminding them कि आपने बहुत दिनों से, you haven't heard that song for a long time. So you send them an SMS to remind them to dial that toll-free number and listen again. But and therefore, you need both.
To borrow from the mecca of all marketing, HUL, can we use the word activation? Are we saying that there is activation consumer behavior that we need to learn, and that's one whole school and discipline? And there is another one, not the word innovation, but whatever, Pushkaraj will find the word, I'm sure, which is really designing it as compared to activating it, and that we need consumer behavior understanding at both levels.
Both
Would
levels,
that be
yeah.
a fair outcome? And,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
and do we do the first one, the higher level one? No, okay, let me not put a caste system, because this is the strategy versus execution debate. But in terms of understanding behavior for design in this new world of consumers with what mobility does, have you guys done enough? I mean, have you read enough, done enough? Can you guide us, tell us where to look, what to do? And then Shubhajit, I'm handing it back to you.
We will actually, I was about to ask that should we take some questions at this point, because we have got some questions and we are having,
okay,
we
you
are
guys
almost
can
close
mail
to the
me
time.
offline. You guys can mail me offline and educate me.
So should we do that from the audience? Okay, so let's take
Sure.
one question which has been asked by Anupama. She is saying, so is persona rather than personality going to drive the marketing? My personality may be stable, but my persona can change every time.
Always true. 30 years ago, a woman called Wendy Gordon, who was the guru god of qualitative research, she wrote a lovely article called The Me That I Am When. And it was in the context of retailing. So yeah, the me that I am when, I think, determines, to my mind, and the word is persona then, so it is, that determines the processing algorithm that I use. That's my view.
Okay. So we have another question from Ravina. What are the differences in subliminal stimuli messages versus nudges versus cognitive biases? Are they overlapping circles, or subliminal and nudges are synonyms? Atishi, would you like to take a dig? Even I'm lost. Tough question for me.
So I'm sure there's definitions somewhere. Nudges are not necessarily subliminal, and therefore there will be an overlap, but they're not the same thing. So just a nudge, which is actually like, let's say I go back to my e-commerce website example, a nudge which says you've got things in your cart is anything but subliminal. It's actually calling it out and telling you, but it's a nudge all the same, because they're trying to, they're telling you, hey, you may have forgotten there's something in your cart. Whereas when you read, you just see those stars and you read that, there is a 4.5 rating out of 5 and there are 600 reviews, versus someone's got a 5 out of 5 rating but there's 1 review. Maybe some of that is subliminal, how you just absorb that and you react to it, or maybe it's not subliminal, maybe it's actually you're thinking about it and there's cognition there. But so I'm not too sure how the jargons are used differently, but yeah.
And one question to Pushkaraj, and I think this is very interesting. The question comes from Chandrasekhar. He's saying, what are the customer behavior changes during pandemic in online customer interaction on platforms? So if you can give some insights from what has happened in your company.
Sure. So I'm part of the professional beauty business at Unilever. So we run a company called Lakme Lever. I will speak in that context.
Please.
I am not completely familiar and not authorized to really speak about the larger Hindustan Lever FMCG. So I'm just sort of, giving that disclaimer straight out. So I think clearly, see, number one, what happened online and offline, there is some sort of sync there, right? So what happened offline is safety was the number one criteria, and brand I trust suddenly moved up the need ladder, right? So when consumers chose which brand to trust with their time and their money, and it was more their time, because somewhere spending time in a retail outlet also means you're trusting your life in that brand. I think safety became number one, right? And therefore, for us, putting a very safe customer journey, we had a customer journey which was redesigned with a panel of doctors. We trained all our 4,000 people on that customer journey. We had several audits and then only allowed salons to operate, right? So putting that in place and then winning the faith of customers. Then we did a quick research to see how our customers feel about it. about 97% said they find our salon even safer than their house. And then sort of, playing that back to consumers so that they can, they can see the impact of that, I think was the first thing. If you look at what happened on the digital space, consumers wanted to fill that little gap that came in their, sort of professional beauty consumption with online interactions, right? So we started doing, we used our Instagram or our Facebook handles to do online consultations. We did that, as a forum with a large number of customers, but we also opened our training teams and our experts to our consumers to actually book slots and do this online, even one-on-one, right? So consumers wanted advice, wanted expertise, and then of course they would either buy a DIY kit, or then they would buy some products which would help them take care of their skin, their hair, or nails, or whatever, right? But they also needed expertise to be delivered to them in a convenient way, right? So to be able to facilitate this through online tools and all that, I think became another important thing for us. And then as the lockdown started easing off, we started seeing the same consumers then walking back into the physical space, and then sort of consuming both expertise as well as services and products inside the physical space, right? And I think we are seeing that reverse a bit right now. As we are going into the second wave, we are seeing the same consumers now saying that we will call you, we'll do online consultations, and we've set up a web store now so they can buy those products on the web store, and they'll keep that journey going, right? So I just think safety became number one, seeking information, result, and in some sort of way science, because everybody became like a half-baked scientist through the pandemic, right? So I think that became number two. And then of course the regular sort of stacking order of quality, safe, quality of products used, expertise, interventions, and all of that stayed the same.
I really would have loved to continue a little bit more. I still had a few questions left, but we are almost, we are actually out of time. Sorry. So let me just give a little bit of summarization on what we actually discussed. So if we try to look into the topic on consumer behavior and the role of technology and mobility, I would say that we have to start with the understanding of the context. Then we also have actually discussed about the way value processing unfolds in reality, and whether an understanding of that is needed a priori, or whether an understanding of that can be generated as we keep on trying multiple alternatives. And what is the role of technology nudges in those journeys or in those micro journeys? And instead of thinking big, can we actually start thinking small, and then actually treat each individual as a market rather than a mass market? And obviously, when we talk about this, I think we also discussed a very interesting tripartite fit between context, content, and intent, which actually, that if the understanding of all those three are there with the marketer, I think that nano segmentation may actually become more successful. Obviously, the understanding of why is also important, as well as what, because that trial and error actually may give us the what, but it may not necessarily give us the why, and that is where the value processing understanding of that becomes important. So with that, I would like to wrap up. I would like to thank the panel members on behalf of IIM Ahmedabad and Center for Behavioral Science for being with us and being part of such an interesting discussion. I could not take all the questions, I'm sorry, because we are out of time. In fact, I also had a very interesting question on whether content can change context. And I would actually ask all the panel members as well as the participants also to give it a thought, because at least in the Indian context, I think we are observing a lot of changes which are happening in the context itself, because the content has changed, content in multiple senses. With that, let us thank let us thank the participants also for being here with us, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Great, I'll just begin. Okay, so greetings of the day, panelists and fellow presenters. I'm Khushi, a final year undergraduate at Symbiosis School of Economics, and I'll be presenting my paper that'll follow the journey of educational startup White Hat Junior, a coding platform for the children of the ages 16 to 14 years, The startup has been all over the internet since its acquisition by Byju's. Over the next couple of slides, I'll introduce the case-based paper and explore the reasons behind White Hat Junior's expeditious rise, mainly owed to its marketing strategy and its eventual advertisement ban by Advertising Standard Council of India. So before we go ahead with the introduction, I'll briefly explain the crux of the presentation. White Hat Junior's key marketing strategy included evoking a sense of missing out on an experience. This marketing strategy basically aimed at inducing fear in the minds of parents and consumers before buying, in order to buy the subscription for their children. The startup quickly managed to create a niche amongst the software professionals and later expanded to the Indian households. Over the next 18 minutes, I will talk about this marketing strategies, how it pressurizes the average consumer household into enrolling into the program by inducing fear in their mind, the anticipated losses that play into the mind of a consumer as a result of not enrolling in the program usually are the success of neighbors' children who enroll into the program, the lost opportunity that their child would not be the next tech wizard. This paper presentation will hence focus on fear of missing out marketing from a brand's point of view using a case study approach. So coming to the introduction, FOMO or the fear of missing out can be defined as a feeling. Hope my screen is visible right now.
It is visible.
Okay, great. So yeah, I was saying that FOMO can be defined as a feeling that others might be having a rewarding experience from which one is absent. FOMO is essentially an emotional response aroused by either of the three, fear, guilt, or regret, that compels an individual to be in touch with what everybody else is doing. FOMO in the popular culture may mean regret of missing out on an event or a product. For example, a music concert that an individual couldn't attend, but their friends did. Now coming to FOMO as a marketing strategy. The strategy uses the above three emotions, fear, guilt, and regret, through advertisements that target the internal hesitancy of an individual to buy a product or opt for a service, which ultimately drives the chances of individual purchasing the product. For example, Spotify, a music streaming platform, in its advertisement plays, your friends have subscribed to the online event, have you. Now, marketing strategies and principles keep evolving every now and then. And in the world of instant gratification internet platforms, the number of fear-based advertisements have only quadrupled in the last 5 years. With tough competition in the online advertising industry, young brands have to shift their focus from conventional marketing strategy to a newer and more promising, sales-generating forms of advertisement. Now, getting to the objective of the research aimed at studying the effectiveness and impact of FOMO-based marketing by taking the example of White Hat Junior. To study the extent to which FOMO marketing impacts capturing long-term consumers, and third, to analyze the efficacy of the strategy and its long-term sustainability. Now, this paper is a qualitative research paper with a case study analysis type, which takes the case of White Hat Junior. So secondary sources for the case study has been gleaned from newspaper, journal articles, and the Instagram handles and Twitter and Facebook handles of White Hat Junior. Now coming to the case analysis. The advertisements of White Hat Junior induced that created a sense of missing out. So I've displayed some of the advertisements in the slide. Coder at the age of 7 and Microsoft CEO at the age of 21 with an image of Bill Gates. 7-year kid from XYZ and ABC school became the youngest app developer. 12-year-old who learned AI to get 1.2 crore job from Google, while other kids of his age didn't know what to do after school. So now the analysis of the advertisement can be explained that in a country like India, where the focus on academics runs very deep, the edtech platforms quickly realized it could make gains by subtly inducing fear in the minds of parents or the consumers in this case. Because more than half of 50% of the user base of White Hat Junior resides in non-metropolitan or tier 2, tier 3 cities, for whom tech pioneers are an inspiration. Now, White Hat Junior also used a ubiquitous mascot by the name of Wolf Gupta, whose age sometimes became 7, 10, or 12 years old. He may not be real, but he is a personified model child of the digital age. The intent behind the advertisement to induce the intent behind Wolf Gupta to make a ubiquitous mascot was to induce heavy doses of FOMO in the minds of consumers, which are the Indian middle class in this case. Now, the coding platform also used the image of Bill Gates, Sundar Pichai, and Mark Zuckerberg without their approval to send the message that in the 21st century, coding is the key to success. Now, after all these advertisements, White Hat Junior faced a lot of backlash and tremendously on the social media platforms. White Hat Junior's coding program for young children do not market the power of coding as much as they as a 21st century skill, but they aim at instilling fear that they in the minds of the parents that their child will not be the next Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg if they do not sign up for their program, hence making them loss averse in this situation. Now, White Hat Junior also used scarcity appeal. Some of its advertisement also read few spots available, which creates a sense of limited seats, which further pushes the consumer to enroll into the platform. Now, after all these events, the advertisements of White Hat Junior were eventually banned by the Advertising Standard Council of India after heavy scrutiny. The startup also faced a huge uproar and backlash on social media, and also currently is facing heavy lawsuits. Now, coming to the analysis, what we can infer from the theoretical framework that is already in the public domain. So, White Hat Junior's marketing strategy can be explained by loss aversion theory to an extent. The Indian culture that celebrates education and toppers for parents, the stakes for them is as high as in the stock markets. The parents and the consumers do not want to take the onus or guilt of not purchasing the courses for their children. Hence, they end up enrolling their child. This case could be one of the classic examples of loss aversion from a marketing perspective. In White Hat Junior's case, parents anticipated losses from not enrolling their children loomed larger, which tricked them into buying the subscription. This observation has also been observed in the case of Korean teens and Australian millennials in the other research conducted in this field. Now, the strategy can also be explained through a different theory, cognitive appraisal theory, which exposes that the consumer makes a decision based on the anticipated positive feelings. In this case, it was that the parents thought their children would become the next big CEO of a tech company only if their children learned how to code at an early age, which drove the purchase likelihood based out of positive consequences of enrolling into the platform. As I've already mentioned, that White Hat Junior used scarcity appeals along with FOMO. A cocktail of these two marketing strategies eventually drove the purchase likelihood. Now, the ethical concerns regarding the marketing strategy. Now, the Indian middle class has always been privy to dubious marketing strategies. However, nothing as of the scale of FOMO marketing. White Hat, one of the reasons why FOMO marketing worked out fantastically for White Hat Junior was because their advertisement projected a fear in the name of children. Having seen the importance Indians give to education, the FOMO marketing tactic worked in favor of White Hat Junior. In conclusion, this marketing tactic by White Hat Junior played with the mind of an individual into overvaluing anticipated gains and overvaluing anticipated regret. Now, coming to the conclusion, the marketing strategy has been termed as very aggressive and unethical. And White Hat Junior has received immense backlash for it. The use of brand image of Google, Microsoft, and Facebook in their advertisements without their legal consent damaged the startup's reputation eventually, forcing it to retract its advertisement and withdraw from the marketing strategy. Now, the psychological tactic used was used not to inform the parents about the pervasiveness and the importance of coding, but to induce fear and eventually regret in their minds. Although FOMO marketing helped make White Hat Junior a brand name in India, but it eventually hampered the brand image, making it essentially a ticking time bomb. Now, is this strategy sustainable? This strategy is not sustainable because it is self-destructive in the first place. Now, coming to what are the solutions and recommendations that one can take forward. Now, alternatives to FOMO marketing is moment marketing, which is based on making advertisements by following an online trend or popular topic and by relating it to their brand with puns. Amul is a classic example of moment marketing. They use the burning topic of the day and relate it with their own brand to market their product. Now, coming to what can be taken ahead from here. Now, case studies of different brands can be studied across the globe that use this kind of marketing, and a pan-India study can also be undertaken, which can identify what are the other sources that drive the FOMO behavior. One such fear that we conclusively can confirm is education. Now, these are the exhibits of the advertisement. I leave it as it is for the viewers to see and analyze. And with this, I conclude my presentation.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, are you done?
Yes, so I'm done.
So since we are well ahead of time, we can take a few questions from the participants, if they have any.
No, sir. I don't think there are any questions.
Okay, so I would like to congratulate Khushi because being a graduate student and coming up and presenting at these types of forums are definitely something which is worth commending. So I don't have any questions for you.
Thank you so much, sir.
So we can shift to the next presenter in that case.
Okay, great. Is there any feedback or any particular thing that you would like to draw from the presentation?
Only one, it's not advertisement, it's advertisement. That's a major pronunciation mistake which in India we do. It's not advertise, it's advertise.
Advertisement.
Other than that, at your level, whatever you have done is commendable.
Okay.
We can take us feedback one-to-one at a later stage, but for this level, I mean, at your level, it's a very well done job.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Cool.
The next presenter, Mr. A.
Yes,
Ramesh.
please.
Is Mr. Ramesh here? Is Dr. Srinivasa here? Could we request Dr. Rahul Khandelwal to please give his presentation? We can contact Mr. A. Ramesh at that time. Hello, sir.
Hi. So, Professor Bapat, you are going to present? You are on
We
mute.
can't hear you.
Okay. So can we start?
Yes, please.
Okay. So first of all, I extend sincere gratitude to the organizers for organizing a wonderful conference, and respected session chair, Professor Shubhadeep Roy, and faculty members, audience. So we are pleased to, Professor, I heard Shubhadeep saying, he likes this offline conference. So this is, myself and Professor Rahul Khandelwal. So we met at one of the offline conference and just at a cup of tea, and then that's where our journey started. And then few phone calls, his phone call, my phone call. And that's how this is the outcome of that. So I'm thankful to Professor Rahul, who has joined me in this journey. In fact, he was pushing me a lot to come up and to participate in this conference. So here the topic is about the examining the role of consumer hope in the context of relationship marketing in financial services with reference to digital payment apps. Now this topic has assumed a lot of importance, digital payment apps. I think we are all using digital payment apps in some form or another, whether it is Amazon Pay or Google Pay or unified payment interface. So what we see, there's a contribution by Virhoof and about the digital transformation, mentioning that digital technologies are playing a very important role, in shaping the digital business model, and the objective is to add value to the consumers. And that's where the digital tech development is playing a very important role, and in making these experiences convenient, efficient, transparent, and easier for the consumers. On one side, there is definitely a benefit for the organizers, for the organizations or the firms, in terms of improving their efficiency. On the other side, the consumers benefit, in terms of the improved convenience that they get. And India is a very interesting example, where Indian government, where we had an initiative like Digital India, and umbrella organization being formed, that is National Payments Corporation of India. And whatever the experiments that, or whatever the success of NPCI has done it in India is really noteworthy, and other nations are also keen to follow, and which can be looked from the fact that there are 2 billion transactions per month, that is in unified payment interface. And that's why this topic has assumed a lot of importance. One is importance definitely to the practitioners, and other to the academicians as well. So this is basically intersection of the work, or we can say intersection of information systems and marketing, and this study it attempts to answer the questions such as digital quality and perceived social value, right? So how it drives the consumer hope. And we have taken this in the context of the payment app domain, And then we also try to, connect this with the relationship marketing theory. So here we are looking into the theories of, that is, affect theory of social exchange and relationship marketing. So these two theories we are trying to, bring into this paper or in this manuscript. And then thereafter, so basically what we are trying to look into, we are looking into the consumer hope and antecedent of consumer hope and consequences of consumer hope. When we say consequences of consumer hope, then we try to connect with the, the trust, commitment, and then word of mouth. And word of mouth, of course, for a marketer, it plays a very important role. So that has been motivation. I will say a major contribution of this study is that, of course, there's a huge growth, accelerated growth into the electronic payments or the payment digital app. As we see the growth figures, each month, they are crossing and, they're creating the records. So this has, of course, has attracted the attention from the policymakers, from the government, from the marketers, and consumers also benefit. And that's where, our paper contributes to the nascent literature of a digital payment app, because this is a new phenomena. As I told that we try to integrate the affect theory of a social exchange, because when we talk of hope, then it has a close association with the social exchange. And then when we consider the constructs such as trust, commitment, then those are having the linkages with the relationship marketing theory. So, and then of course, the attaining a positive word of mouth is definitely an ultimate objective, whether we see it through a brand pyramid or any other, or the marketing funnel. It's loyalty, that is what the marketers look at, right? So how it can help in achieving the loyalty in the context of the digital payment apps, because there are the plethora of the digital apps. One is the bank-based apps, and then of course the companies such as Amazon, Google are also participating in this. So a study from an Indian context, we feel that can make a significant contribution. Now we would just like to dwell into the theoretical background. So we look into the digital payment app, which is basically a digital transactions which are becoming very popular and witnessing an accelerated transactions and adoptions, not only in India, but the world over. As I told, that we are covering here the affect theory of social exchange. Now the contributor of this theory is Lawler in the year 2001. And he felt that, the consumer hope, if you look into the aspect of the consumer hope, it is a very interesting, cognitive, affective kind of a response, but it is a different from other, dimensions, which I would like to, other dimensions, of course, like self-efficacy and, optimism, right? So from that, it is different. So here, what we try to do is that we try to look into the consumer. As I told that it is different, this construct, the consumer hope is different from self-efficacy, because when we talk of self-efficacy, it is about the capabilities to organize and to execute, right, the course of action. And while optimism, this construct again is different from optimism. It is about attitude, within the good outcomes. So that is consumer hope it is conceptualized. It is a combination of motivation as well as the pathways, right? And here we try to also, relate with the relationship quality. And we have also taken this work from Professor Jagdish Sheth, and we are cited, that is in the year 2015, a meta-analysis on relationship quality, trust, commitment. So we also tried to connect the affect theory of social exchange with the relationship marketing theory. And this is a model that we would like to, we cover in this manuscript. And now I would request my co-author to carry it forward, and then maybe at some point of time I'll come back. Okay, so over to Rahul. Rahul, are you there? Rahul?
Thank you, sir. I thanks Dr. Bapat for guiding me in this journey and in this paper. We had a nice collaboration, and I'll just take over. So, as well explained regarding hope and affect theory of social exchange, if we see, consumer trust is also well perceived. Trust is also a useful of rating system and personal relationship. Trust and commitment, if you see, are both important in a relationship marketing domain. Well said by Jagdish Seth in 2015. Customer desire to uphold a valued relationship as to the warrant maximum effort and maintaining it by Moorman in 1992. Similarly, if we see, there are certain different dimensions. The acceptance of word of mouth is also based that premises customer trust, communication from other people, and also it's a relationship of satisfaction. By Mohammed in 2017, word of mouth may be of online mode and offline mode. Offline mode, word of mouth is about the role of sender to pass the information based on the belief that it will be beneficial to the user. And e-mode, if you see, the online information, research related to tangible product and purchases are very important in this aspect. Further, if you see in the model, sir, could you change the slide, Bapat sir? Yeah, it is wholly explained that hope, being the mediator, has a good relationship with all the other constructs to receive brand value, receive quality, trust, commitment, and word of mouth. So jotting this out, we had figured certain items and constructs in the descriptive manner from the literature. If we take the first construct, trust, mentioned by Mukherjee in 2007, I felt that payment app brand is very dependable. Followed the next item, brand is of high integrity. And the third item, that is brand as a safe medium for transaction and purchase. If you see the second construct, commitment, again by Mukherjee and Nath, it is committed in maintaining the relationship with the payment app, that is a brand. People are very committed to certain brands like Google Pay. They do believe in the relationship. The second item in commitment, they feel a very high degree of association with the payment app that brand I transit with. So when they feel a very high degree of association with that payment app while doing a transaction. The third item in the commitment, that's I put the effort in maintaining the relationship. So efforts in maintaining the relationship is also one of the commitment construct by Mukherjee and Nath. The third construct in a study was digital quality, as mentioned by Papas. It is important that a payment app brand provides detailed information. If you speak of digital quality here, digital quality has a very important role in all the aspects of a brand. Digital payment, it refers to an electronic device that allows an individual to make an electronic payment or transaction. digital payment can be facilitated through linking individual bank account to the digital wallet or payment using the QR code. So we felt it's an important, the detailed information provided by the brand. The second item in digital quality was brand provides accurate information. The information provided by the brand was accurate. The third item in digital quality was the brand can be dependent upon what it was promised. So what the brand promises early and fast, without delay, without any barriers, smooth reading of the QR code. So without any barriers, if the brand is promising, we say brand can be dependent upon what it has promised. Next item here in digital quality was brand understand and adapt to specific user needs. So here, if we speak of digital quality and if we speak of other brands, they try to adapt according to the consumers, what they want, what are the needs, what are the payment mode. If you see all the other apps, amount of rupees 1 is also transferred and amount of rupees 10,000 also transferred. So it is not only the amount matters, but it adapts to each and every specific user. The digital quality was very, very important.
Okay, so now, Professor Rahul, we can move to the next on the hypothesis, right? Because of the time shortage.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Right. So just to brief that we have considered the perceived brand value, that is social, then hope, and then word of mouth. And now Professor Rahul will now explain now the hypothesis part, right? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So here hypothesis which we framed was a study of digital quality, social value and hope. We pose an hypothesis considering the relationship marketing. A digital quality has a positive impact on customer hope in the context of digital application that are referred by many authors, Bloby, Fenry and Noller, Goldberg and Fazli Hassan. So there is a continuous study on this positive impact on customer hope in the context of digital application. So we pause this first hypothesis. And moving on to second hypothesis, social value enhanced to improve the self-concept. If we speak about social value is a utility and contribute to enhancing customer confidence, resulting into more positive goals. So therefore, we pose the second hypothesis. Social value has a positive impact on customer hope in the context of digital application. By author Switney and Souther and Snyder, 2002. The third hypothesis was hope, trust and commitment attribution theory. So this attribution theory, we framed the third hypothesis. Customer hope has a positive impact on customer trust in the context of digital application, by Diego Marquez, 2015. On the same strength, customer hope has a positive impact on commitment in the context of digital payment application, also by Rhodes and Eisenberg, 2002 and Butch, 2015. The theory of customer relationship has a positive impact on the customer, by Morgan and Hunt, similar studies, Corbin and Jordan, again Morgan and Hunt, and many authors in the lineup has studies the customer relationship having the positive impact on customer. So we framed the three hypotheses, H5, H6 and 7. Customer trust has a positive impact on the word of mouth in the context of digital payment. Consumer commitment has a positive impact on word of mouth in the context of digital payment applications. And consumer trust has a positive impact on commitment in the context of digital payment. So these three hypotheses based on theory of customer relationship by various authors. Then we move to research methodology, where we defined digital payment users in India. We collected this data with the help of questionnaire in a Google form. For this study, we selected 30 students which were divided into groups, and each group were given certain tasks to move in government offices, private offices, some self-employed people that are entrepreneurs. And the questions were asked on Likert scale. So students collected the data. Out of 363 overall sample, 301 respondents were finalized and were judged. Non-biased responses were analyzed by using chi-square and other tests. If you see in the sample, we found that many of the age group between 30 and 44 were using this app repeatedly, and out of the respondent 301, we find 122 were employed in a private institution, whereas 65 were employed in a government institution, and 98 were self-employed.
Could you please move a little quickly, because it's already the time is up.
Yeah,
So I can give some
over.
extra time, but please, please go to the main results.
Sir, Bapat
So,
sir,
okay, I will, yeah, okay.
yeah, it's almost over. Only one word to say that
Yeah, okay.
the people.
So, okay, I will go. So, thank you, sir. We will stick to the time. And so basically we made the criteria of the convergent validity as well as the discriminant validity. There are other tables, but because of the paucity of the, the space, we are not able to show all the tables, but we'll come to the results. That is more important. So, the sample, we also, we also looked into the criteria of the common method bias, and as per the recommendations, the Harman single factor, it made the criteria regarding the standard cutoff value. And now, as regards to the results, we used the PLS and the R square, that is for the we had in the range from, for the consumer hope was 0.797. Consumer trust 0.581, commitment 0.729, and at word of mouth it was 0.690. So we tried to evaluate the digital direct effect, and which was also made, and thus, and then we tried to look into the mediating effect. So we went referred to the Hare's process of the mediation. And we stick to the variance accounted for, and we consider that what 20% to 60%, if it is falling, then it is considered as a partial mediation. So thus it meets the partial, mediation. This is what our results, state. Although in this paper we have not highlighted about the gender, but we also did a moderation analysis on the impact as a gender as a moderator on this model. But very important about the result, if we want to draw the results, this manuscript or this paper or this study can be compared with, there are other studies which has also been conducted, by OSDIC, on looking into the effect of the channels. Similarly, we found there are a lot of kind of a seminal work that we are referred to the work till the year 2018-19, like Fazal Ahmed, that is what which has appeared in Journal of Retailing and the Consumer Services and Journal of Consumer Affairs. So that is where the two journals where this Consumer Hope, has found, a kind of a coverage. So we find that, when we compare this study or our findings, with study of Fazal Ahmed, then we find that, they also looked into, but there are certain differences. So differences like in the antecedents, there are other factors which are considered. We considered 2 antecedents, and we felt that, these 2 antecedents are very important. So Fazal Hassan, they considered like brand quality, consumer price, while we considered the consumer social value and the pursued quality, that we considered. And our study also confirms, although this is first of its kind, very few studies has been conducted on the digital payment apps. So this study also, confirms, the relationship marketing theory, specifically in the area of the digital payment apps. And the Fazal Hassan, he didn't consider the role of word of mouth, and our study, has added that. And then the work of the Daughtry and Hoffman, we can also try to compare where, where word of mouth has been considered as one of the most important factors affecting the consumer behavior. So in conclusion, we can say that this study, specifically into the digital payment app, is a very interesting study because we are trying to integrate the two major theories, that is affect theory of social exchange and the relationship marketing theory in the context of the payment app. And there are suggestions regarding the future scope, and which can be again improved by adding the different constructs. And maybe for future research can also cover the experimental study. We considered the cross-sectional study or sample. So future study can also include the experimental study. So thank you very much for giving us time, and we really look forward to your suggestions and your guidance, sir.
Okay, for the sake of time, we would really not have the Q&A now.
Okay.
Let us have the last presenter, and if we still have time left in the session, we will have Q&A for both the sessions, both the presentations. Okay, I hope that is okay. So the other presenters actually lost the link, but I think they are back.
Yeah, we are back. Are you able to hear?
Yes, we are able to hear you.
Yeah. So we'll.
So Professor Bapat, could you stop sharing? Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. You are able to see the screen?
Yes.
You are able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes.
This is the last presentation. I am A. Ramesh from Vigyan Jyoti Institute of Management. Our paper is on contemporary trends in communication for the financial services marketing. So typically, this is the structure of the paper: introduction, literature review, gaps and objectives of the study, methodology analysis, discussion and conclusion. So typically, as you know, the Indian financial services contribute great proportion to the GDP. I mean, almost 6 to 7%. And in that, we are considering life insurance, mutual funds, and the fixed deposits, and also the equity kind of thing, which appeal to various demographic classes and also play a prominent role in the family life cycle. And over a period of time and over the decades, in fact, the marketing of these financial services has come a long way, from initially scared to sell adopted by LIC to the full celebration of life by HDFC. And also these days, the policy bazaar with the intermediaries, it has come a long way. So typically we look at the literature, there are two routes. One is rational route, second is emotional route. Rational route is called central route for information processing, these two kinds of advertisement strategies. Whereas emotional route, it covers fear appeal, which typically LIC was using, and other kind of things. So both approaches are evident in marketing of these financial services. So typically the objectives of the paper is to identify the select campaigns, classic campaigns over 4 decades, and use that, how they fit into the FCB model, to what extent they are emotional, to what extent they are rational. And second objective of the conference is to identify the investment options, media and advertisement appeal preferences among the millennial investors using the conjoint analysis. So for the part 1, we have used secondary data. For the part 2, we have used primary data to apply the conjoint analysis. So typically these are the campaigns we have selected for the FCB model to identify what is the pattern, what is the trend in the financial services marketing. Typically we started 1980, we have LIC Roti Kapda Aur Makan, which is named after a very famous Hindi movie perhaps. And second is the classic campaign Heere Ko Kya Pata Tumhari Umar Kya Hai, SBI function plan, which talks about the celebration of life. Second is HDFC Sar Utha Ke Jiyo, which is a trend, because when it talks that old people also need self-respect, which arises from the financial dependence. And second is Rice chessboard story, which is very interesting. when it talks about the placing of rice in a chessboard, whereby it gets compound multiplied and thereby the king is unable to fulfill that. Second is IDFC One Idiot YouTube film, and LIC Zindagi ke Saath Zindagi ke Baad hai, and Ambani the investor sponsored content, native content, mutual fund sahi hai, generic campaign, Policy Bazaar life insurance pehla lo, this is again a generic campaign, Talo nahi Policy Bazaar life insurance, this is again a generic campaign. So these are some of the campaigns, the last one being the first one, which is the recent one, whereby they kind of the first ad which focuses on the imparting a financial education to the daughter by the mother. So these are the typical very landmark campaigns, classic campaigns in the financial services marketing. If we were to map this using the FCB model, how that would be. So these are typical campaigns. One Idiot film on YouTube, which has garnered millions of views. HDFC Sarv Uta ke Jio. The next is HDFC Hero ko kya pata umar kya hai. Second is HDFC life insurance, right? Sabse pehla life insurance, which is a very important thing. The extreme left, I'm showing you the chessboard, which is based on the story of King Tenali days, whereby one of the kings, one of the person, Mr. comes to it and asked to give the rice. So he said for every square, he doubles the rice amount. And ultimately, it keeps on doubling so much so that king was unable to do it. So this ad was based on the Sundaram Finance mutual fund ad. The next extreme, you can see the term insurance. It increases by age. When you start at a lesser age, the premium is less. So this is a kind of face app you see on the right side, the old age, on the young side, on the left side is mine is the younger age. So it talks about the rational aspects. Second is also talks about the rational aspect. So you look at all these advertisements, typically we see some of them predominantly fall into emotional side, some of them fall into rational side, where they talk about information, where they talk about returns, where they talk about the investments. So this is a typically kind of things, high thinking, high involvement on the extreme of my left, other side extreme high involvement and high feeling. So based on this high thinking, high involvement, typically the medium platforms like blogs, articles, native and branded content by Policy Bazaar, and sometimes use of traditional media like print fall into the category whereby they try to explain the cost benefit analysis of the various policies and also the term policy and other aspects. Whereas in the extreme right side, we have the long format, short formats like YouTube, live stream videos, and these are the media platforms which are amenable for long-term formats for rendering this story. So the point here is we have informative strategy and we have effective strategy, and therefore the financial services marketers use both of them so as to convey and persuade the customers. So typically this, the reviewers asked to link with neuromarketing. So we thought probably as a going forward, if I want to test a particular appeal with a particular kind of media platform, with a particular kind of instrument, for example, let's say fixed deposits or mutual funds, with what media and what appeal, rational, emotional, would it get what kind of response if you scan the brain scanning of the post advertisement of the investors. So probably we can find which is more effective based on the scanning reports. Then probably you can use that for the as a kind of pre-testing and release that advertisements. So this is we thought that probably we can link it with the findings with the neuromarketing. So next part is the conjoint analysis. We have chosen 3+4 financial instruments. Typically, these have been based on secondary data. Second is medium, which is based on the, again, based on the secondary data. These are the mediums chosen by the investors. Then we have, as usual, the rational appeal and emotional appeal. So next, I would hand over my presentation to my co-presenter. Just 1 minute, sir.
Thanks, Professor Ramesh. Previous slide. Okay, that's fine. Actually, it's not moving the slide, sir. That's the problem. The slide is not moving.
Honestly, maybe it needs boost. I really don't have a solution to this. Why don't you just close the PowerPoint and then reopen it and share and then do it?
So I think it's still, the screen is still being shared by Mr. A. Ramesh. So if you could ask him.
Actually, it is shared, sir. Actually, the problem is it's not moving the slide. Next slide.
Could you exit the slide mode and then
just
reshare
exit
your
the
screen?
slideshow and resume. Share from your system and resume.
So if you could just work it like this also, it's all right. We can see your presentation. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Good evening, sir. To resume the presentation, am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible. Loud and clear.
Thank you, sir. To examine various investment alternatives and the mediums of advertisement and advising appeal, preferences among millennials, and to know how they value these factors or attributes, we have used conjoint analysis. Conjoint analysis is a multivariate statistical tool which is used to evaluate customer preferences for products and services. And it is also used at individual level to group respondents with the similar part words or importance values to identify segments. The estimated conjoint utility or part worth utilities are used in combination with the demographic variables such as gender, age group, so on and so forth to derive or arrive respondent groups so that the part worths are very close to each other or the preferences are very close to each other. In this study, we have taken 3 attributes to examine how they value the attributes like financial investment alternatives, medium of advertisement, and advertisement appeal. Here we have taken these 3 attributes at different levels. The first attribute we have considered was financial investment options with the 4 levels: life insurance policies, including ULIP, public provident fund, we call PPF, tax-free bonds, and mutual funds. And the second attribute we have considered for the study was medium of advertisement with the 4 levels: social media, including Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, live stream apps, blogs and sponsored content, YouTube, both short film and larger duration ads. And the third attribute we have considered was advertising appeal. We have taken 2 levels. One is rational appeal and the other one is emotional appeal. So this design give rise to 32 possible combinations, but rating these 32 possible combination is a tedious task by any individual. So we have used orthogonal design to reduce the number of combinations in a way that there is no collinearity among the attributes. So when we use orthogonal design, we have arrived at these 16 possible combinations we call card descriptions. We have given these 16 card descriptions to our respondents, and we were asked them to rate these 16 combinations according to their preferences. So these are these here. This table indicate that the 16 card descriptions derived from orthogonal design. So this is the output of these are the respondent demographics. Actually, we have adopted a convenience sampling method to collect the data from our respondents, and we have got data from our responses from 52 responses from eligible or qualified respondents. So this is the output of conjoint analysis. This table indicates that the utility estimates for each level of the 3 attributes and the average relative importance of the 3 attributes. From this table, it can be observed that the relative importance of the 2 attributes like financial investment options and medium of advertisement are of no much difference. Here, the relative importance for financial investment option is 37.61%, and it is with medium of advertisement is close to 40%. There is no much difference between these two attributes, but medium of advertisement slightly has high relative importance over financial investment alternatives, which indicate that medium of advertisement play an important role in consumer likelihood when they go for a specific investment alternative. And when you analyze the utility estimates, here it is exhibiting the second column. Here, when you see the utility estimates for each level of the three attributes, it can be observed that the highest positive utility is for live stream apps with the 3.25 utility estimate, which indicate that medium of advertisement through live stream apps, it would increase the investors' likelihood to invest on various investment alternatives. This is probably our sample. Actually, we have got data from millennials. This is probably our sampling units are millennials who are in between 20 and 30, who are heavy users of internet. With the availability of internet, with the speed of internet, and they are very used to live stream apps these days. So probably we have got this kind of high utility for live stream apps. Now, after live stream apps, we have the next highest utility for rational thinking or rational appeal with 1.75, which indicate that when the advertisement which is rational appeal, which is having a rational appeal, would increase the respondents' likelihood when they go for a specific investment alternative. Then, interestingly, what we have here, live stream apps have a 3.25 utility estimate, but interestingly, we have got a negative utility for blogs and sponsored content and YouTube, both short film and larger duration, with the negative utility of -2.25 and -1.25, which indicate that when the medium of advertisement through either blogs or YouTube, the likelihood to purchase or to opt a specific investment alternative would decrease. When you evaluate various financial investment alternatives, the highest utility we have for tax-free bonds. Means these millennials are giving much importance to tax-free bonds than any other investment alternative. Especially we have got here a negative utility for life insurance policy, including ULIP, which indicating that this set of respondents are not interested with or interested on taking life insurance policies. So they are more intended to take either going for tax-free bonds or PPF or mutual funds rather than life insurance policies. With this, I can conclude. I will conclude that. So the next continue. I mean, Professor Ramesh will continue the next slides.
You're able to hear?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah, so basically based on the conjoint analysis, we can identify the what is called the most preferred combination of the media platforms as well as investment platforms. So given the combination, it can be done. So this is how the reason is.
I don't know why it is not moving.
Now the presenters are also not moving.
So we are done with the presentation.
Is
so,
it?
Yeah.
Okay, no, you can still allow us to see you.
Okay.
I mean, it's like allowing our students whenever the class is done.
Yeah.
They just don't wait to rush out. So yeah. So we have some time.
Yeah.
So let us have questions for both the presenters. If you have, shoot the questions, but at least let us know which paper you are asking the question on.
Attendees can raise their hands if they want to ask questions.
For that we need to see the attendees, right?
I'll be looking out for them, sir.
So Jayaprakash has already raised a question, and is in real sense life insurance an investment product? Maybe that is why it has negative response. I think it is towards the second presenters, right?
Yeah.
So could you address this, Ramesh? And
Yeah, I mean, I didn't understand the question. Life insurance, it's typically, although marketers say it is a risk investment product, but the consumers think other way around. So they perceive it as more of investment product. So typically the life insurance, now the focus is on more on term insurance, which is a pure policy. Sometimes we need to differentiate. Probably because of that reason, it has come negative. And young millennials typically shy away from the life insurance. They go for mutual funds.
that actually explains the reason why it has negative response.
Yeah.
And PPF and all these things, because
yes,
that's
but
really
interestingly, PPF, some secondary data survey showed that millennials do go for PPF and public provident fund for long-term investing.
Any questions for the second presenters?
I can't see any questions from the attendees.
If not, then let me give my observations. I give observations to both the papers. For the paper on hope, I have one observation that, see, if you look into hope, that hope is your most important construct. So it can be built much better. I mean, I've gone through the paper also, it does not really come nicely in theory. So somehow you have to bring in some sociological theories of why hope is such an important construct in developing nations. I mean, see, in US, yes, maybe hope is important, but if you look into the nature of development of Eurozone Europe, and I'm talking the pre-COVID scenario, I mean, now everybody is in a mess, but hope is a very, I mean, you know that certain things are in place. Whereas in India, if you look into, and even right now look into the scenario, political scenario, everybody is marketing hope only. So that is something which actually has very, very important significance from the perspective of the study and the context. So build upon that while you are actually talking about the back end and front end. And that also should be reflected in the introduction, because even in the introduction, that is not. So introduction is, the title is too long. So try to focus on that part and then build all the other things as contextual things. Okay, so we are taking financial digital payments because of this. We are taking India because of this. We are taking this because of this. And that actually will not only increase the focus, it will also increase the acceptability of the paper. For the second presentation, or the third presentation rather, I think the conjoint part is not that exciting. The reason is because, I mean, you ask people from abroad as well as India, yes, certain things are very obvious there. The more important part is the analysis of those ads, and which I would suggest has to be done in a much structured way. So if you can do a proper content analysis, so try to see whether in the last 2 decades, the focus has shifted from words to images. The wordings has shifted from being more negative to more positive. The perspective has shifted from what if you die to what all you can do if you do this. So how has the appeal changed? How has the wording changed? How has the sentiments changed? How has the imagery being used or the stories being told? So where there are stories of despair and stories of hope, how have these things changed over time? That I think can actually be a decent contribution, where you are saying that, okay, so in a country which actually has seen changes in the socio-economic strata, this is how insurance sector has actually moved on. Forget insurance, in general investments, the way investments were promoted has changed in this manner. That actually I think will have more significance for a global audience or also for a good quality journal.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
So if there are no more questions, we can thank the presenters And we can also thank the panel members and the participants for being there. And then I think at least this session can be ended.
Okay, sir, sincere thanks to the session chair for bringing a very relevant and excellent, sir, review from your side. We'll really work on it, sir. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.